Good evening and welcome to The Report with me, Jonathan Steele. On tonight's programme, we'll be looking at the result of the Indiana primary in the United States, which has left Donald Trump almost certain to be the Republican Party's nominee for November's presidential election. We'll also be looking at the recent debate in the British House of Commons over whether the UK should accept more unaccompanied Syrian child refugees. And today, the British government offered more support. But first, the advocacy group CAGE has released a new report this week on secret British government propaganda efforts. Based on a year-long investigation, the report revealed the inner details of a covert government programme which they allege has misled the British public by pushing state-sponsored propaganda at or about Muslims by using seemingly independent groups and projects. Our Home Affairs correspondent Afzal Ahmed has this report.
The Muslim community have always been suspicious towards government initiatives focused on counter-terrorism and extremism, which have sowed a climate of fear and suspicion in British society. Spies and informants, for example, is not an unusual thing, but new findings published this week reveal how grassroots organisations that Muslims may have trusted have been allegedly working with the government secretly. The report published by advocacy group CAGE is entitled "We Are Completely Independent." The document alleges that over the past 5 years, the UK Home Office has been cultivating a network of grassroots Muslim voices to promote counter-narratives, all aimed to combat the appeal of extremist narratives among Britain's young people. This has allegedly been through a secret government department called RICU, which is a Research Information and Communications Unit, which with the help of top PR agencies and new media companies have helped these organisations with financial and technical support for the production of the multimedia campaigns. CAGE alleges that the editorial line was determined by the government.
This report shows that the government is secretly using mouthpiece organisations, patsies, to gain their credibility of independence and grassroots connections. And that's very, very damaging for the relationship between Muslims and the government. And they keep on going at this top-down approach rather than just engaging with the groups and the people that are already there.
The PR company that CAGE has put at the heart of the initiative is Breakthrough Media, which is a creative communications agency. Their activities have been secret, according to CAGE, who say are protected by the Official Secrets Act. The seemingly independent groups and projects implicated are the following, which includes organisations from the Somali community, the charity sector and community groups. We contacted the named organisations for an interview, but none have agreed to participate. However, some issued responses and statements online. Spen Hughes from the communications consultancy Verbalization said his legal team is reviewing potentially libelous statements from CAGE. The director of Quilliam Foundation said all the allegations were lies, as Quilliam never had any direct or indirect dealings with RICU over their project, Not Another Brother. The Somali anti-tribalism movement also released a statement saying the allegations against them were complete fabrication, baseless and misleading. In response to the claims that one of their projects was the recipient of large amounts of funding from the government and that the government had an editorial role in the narrative, they said, contrary to information in the recent CAGE report, which stated that the Home Office funded the film Return to Somalia, ATM would like to state that in fact the above initiative was supported by the United Nations. The concept of the film was ATM's, and members of ATM led the editorial rights and had nothing to do with resettlements and deportations of Somalis, as the report alleged. Since its inception, the ATM has not received any funding, directly or indirectly, from the Home Office, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, or Department for Local Governments and Communities. The anti-tribalism movement says that CAGE didn't give them an opportunity to respond, and the allegations were potentially endangering the staff members in Somalia. They are also seeking a formal and public apology by the 9th of May, and are considering whether to pursue a charge of defamation. Faith Associates, who started Imams Online, also issued a statement. They said, "Sadly, CAGE's report has tried to malign all our work with Prevent. Faith Associates, which was established before any PVE strategy, nor have any of its projects and campaigns, have ever been exclusively designed with the desire to implement the government's prevent strategy. They continued, whilst it is true that Imams Online was offered the services of the creative design agency Breakthrough Media, its contribution to our work has always only been on the design aspect. We contacted the Home Office for a statement, and they told us,
"We are very proud of the support RICU has provided to organisations working on the front line to challenge the warped ideology of groups such as Daesh and to protect communities. This work can involve sensitive issues, vulnerable communities and hard-to-reach audiences, and it has been important to build relationships out of the media glare. We respect the bravery of individuals and organisations who choose to speak out against violence and extremism, and it is right that we support, empower and protect them."
Cage insists it will never disclose data that could undercut Britain's national security, adding that the project abandons democratic debate and due process in favour of state secrecy. According to them, the report is about transparency and accountability and the need for the two to be present when the government claims to be working alongside communities. They also warn that civil society organisations, when they become tools of government, spells the end for civil society.
Sadly, it's not even just a taste of what is to come, it's a taste of what's been happening for a long time. You look through history, governments have time and time again used smaller organisations as mouthpieces, pretended that they're grassroots and that they're independent, when in fact they're not. And Britain is just carrying on a tradition here that's a very, very worrying, and something that, to be honest, they should know better than to do, bearing in mind the ideals that we claim to hold on to of freedom, accountability and transparency.
Afzal Ahmed, The Report.
Well, joining me now to discuss this is Ben Hayes, who is one of the co-authors of the Cage report, We Are Completely Independent. Welcome, Ben, to the programme. Was it very difficult to uncover this information that you've now put out in the report?
It was. I mean, the hardest thing was getting to the bottom of RICU's role in this, the Research and Information Communications Unit, which was highlighted in your piece there. RICU sort of appears in early discussions around prevent and countering violent extremism, and it appears in some of the Intelligence and Security Committee reports to Parliament. But after about 2011, it just disappears. Add to that the fact that, you know, we're fairly confident, we know from talking to people who worked at Breakthrough Media that staff were made to sign the Official Secrets Act, you know, which we think is an extremely worrying use of Britain's most draconian secrecy legislation. You know, these things together, plus obviously Breakthrough, you know, was under, you know, an obligation to keep all its work secret. It made it very difficult to investigate, yes.
And do you think that this will now sort of show that the government doesn't trust Muslim communities, that they feel they have to conceal their relationship with the government, these civil society organisations, because there is so much mistrust already?
I think it's been clear for a long time that the government doesn't trust Muslim communities, and you know, this is part of the problem for many years now, really since the inception of Prevent. You know, the Muslim community has been cast as a suspect from community. There's been, you know, all sorts of measures and proposals bandied around about, you know, links between Islam, extremism, terrorism, and I think what our report shows and what is striking is just how, you know, the extent that the UK government is prepared to go to try to control the narrative. Yes, you know, part of this is about, you know, genuine, you know, organisations who genuinely want to combat ISIS, extremism, stop people heading off to Syria and all the rest of it. But if you look more broadly at what this programme was about and how it was conceived, you know, this very idea that the best way for the UK government to get its message out to the Muslim community is to cultivate this sort of network of grassroots, so-called independent organisations, and then, you know, produce these really very slick, high-end messaging. It's that, to me, that is, you know, it's so extremely worrying. It really is, and I think it's almost, you know, unprecedented, certainly since the Cold War, and I think it's that that's going to have surprised a lot of people.
But would it be okay if the government publicly announced that these civil society organisations are getting government money, and the organisations themselves said we're getting some of our funding from the government?
Absolutely. I mean, we went to great pains in the report to say, look, this isn't really about, what these groups are saying. It's not even really about taking money from government. It's about the hoodwinking of the public. The public has to know the difference between a genuine grassroots campaign and government messaging. I've worked with NGOs, small and large, all over the world for 20 years, and we have to maintain this, separation of powers between the security state, the police, the intelligence services on one hand, and civil society, public services, the education sector on the other. And without that, it's so damaging. And the problem that this causes in terms of trust really cannot be understated.
Now, many of these organisations have rejected your findings and said that they're defamatory and libelous and so on. I mean, are you confident that they were not aware of government funding?
I don't want to talk about the specific cases. I don't work at Cage. I cooperated with them on this report, and I know, the lawyers are discussing some of these matters. I think there's very little doubt, none whatsoever. We wouldn't have published anything if we didn't have evidence of either a link to RICU, the Research and Information Communications Unit, or Breakthrough Media, which is the government's go-to PR company for this stuff. It's earned £12 million of government money in the last 4 years, Breakthrough Media. So we were very confident that there was a link between either one or the other. It's really, as we put in the recommendations, it's really up to these organisations how they run themselves. But we've come out very clearly and said, look, it's not about what you're doing. It's about the fact that you are hiding this relationship and presenting yourself as independent.
Well, what about particularly this Breakthrough organisation, Breakthrough Media Network? Do they not anywhere on their website or in their published documents say that they are funded partly by the government?
Not at all. No, it's quite amazing actually the lengths that sort of Breakthrough goes to, to hide its relationship with government on all of this counter-extremism stuff. To the point that we've relied on things like blog posts that people have written and then deleted, or the CVs of people who worked at Breakthrough Media and then put on their CVs the campaigns that they worked on. It's this kind of evidence that has helped us piece together what has been going on here.
Now, how much follow-up has there been from other media? I mean, this should be a major story. Is there a big hue and cry going on, or at Westminster? You heard what the Home Office had to say about it. Obviously, the Guardian's done some substantial reporting on the topic as well. They also have put a lot of stuff out there that was quite different to some of the stuff we had found. I know from talking to other journalists that there is more to come around the groups that are involved in this program and the campaigns that turn out not to be grassroots initiatives, but actually RICU products, to use the parlance. What sort of a public debate that leads to, we'll have to see. Obviously, the government has announced that it's going to make counter-extremism a central part of the Queen's speech. We're going to potentially have this new counter-extremism bill. Cameron's talking about this is what he wants to be his legacy. We're very concerned about the impact of the proposals that may be coming. And again, I think it's really, the challenge is to piece all this together. The sort of the mass surveillance that we know is going on, the targeting of the Muslim community, the profiling, the censorship. There's massive censorship of so-called terrorist propaganda, also on an industrial scale, but very little of this stuff is the sort of violent propaganda that one would naturally associate with ISIS, and we essentially have intelligence services looking at the internet and telling, telecommunications companies, take this down, take that down, take this down. And, Would you say that, sorry to interrupt you, we've got just time for one more question. Would you say that by releasing this information that you've done, assuming that, of course, it's soundly based in fact, that you're somehow endangering the counter-terrorism program of the whole of this country?
Not in a million years, no. I mean, for us, this has always been about, transparency, democracy, and accountability, and maintaining the separation of powers and trying to help people understand what is happening with counter-terrorism, counter-extremism policy in this country.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ben Hayes. That's all we have time for.